71 years. That's how long I spent building my legacy. Brick by brick, book by book, argument by argument. 7 decades of systematic dismantling of what I considered humanity's greatest delusion. And in one afternoon, in the sterile silence of a cardiac ward, all of it, every word, every lecture, every debate, became irrelevant. They found me collapsed in my study, surrounded by the galleys of my final manuscript. The extinction thesis, why death is absolute. Ironic, considering what happened next. My publisher would later tell me the paramedics had to move stacks of my own books to reach my body. Books with titles like The God Delusion and Consciousness, The Beautiful Lie. 23 books, hundreds of essays, a lifetime of certainty. And I was about to discover I'd been wrong about everything that mattered. My name was Dr. Jonathan Ashford. For 7 decades, I was the atheist's atheist. The Richard Dawkins of philosophy, some called me. Others preferred less flattering comparisons. I didn't care. I had truth on my side, or so I believed. I'd spent my entire adult life as a philosophy professor at Cambridge, then Berkeley, then back to Oxford. My specialty, debunking near-death experiences. I had written an entire book dissecting the neurological mechanisms behind what people mistakenly interpreted as glimpses of an afterlife. DMT floods, oxygen deprivation, temporal lobe seizures. I could explain away any mystical experience with cold, hard neuroscience. I'd debated bishops on television, humiliated spiritualists in academic journals. My students revered me. My colleagues, well, they either admired my intellectual rigor or despised my arrogance. Probably both. My wife left me in 1987, said I'd chosen my war against God over our marriage. She wasn't wrong. I had 3 children I barely knew. They'd stopped calling years ago. What use did they have for a father who dissected every cherished belief they'd tried to hold? But my work would outlive me. That's what I told myself every lonely evening in my book-lined study. That's what justified the relationships I'd sacrificed, the warmth I'd refused to feel. I was on the side of reason, of enlightenment, of truth. The morning of September 14th, 2023 started like any other. I was 71 years old, still sharp, still writing. Still angry, if I'm honest. That morning, I'd been working on my final chapter, a particularly vicious takedown of a recent study claiming consciousness persisted after clinical death. I remember typing the words intellectual dishonesty when the pain started, not in my chest, in my jaw. A strange, radiating ache that traveled down my neck. I attributed it to tension, too much coffee, poor posture. I tried to stand and my left arm went numb. The room tilted. I reached for the desk, but my hand wouldn't cooperate. I watched my fingers spasm, watched the manuscript pages scatter like birds taking flight. And then I was on the floor, cheek pressed against the cold hardwood, staring at the dust bunnies under my bookshelf. Such a mundane thing to notice while dying. I thought about calling for help, but I lived alone. 3,000 books for company, but no one to hear me call out. The pain intensified, a crushing weight on my sternum like someone had parked a car on my chest. My vision started to tunnel. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the biological shutdown I've lectured about for 50 years. The cascade of system failures. The final electrical storms in a dying brain. At least I'll die, proven right. At least, then nothing, not darkness, just cessation, a gap in consciousness I can't account for. When awareness returned, I wasn't in my study. I don't know where, somewhere without location, a space that felt infinite, but also somehow intimate. And I wasn't alone. There was a child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, sitting cross-legged in front of me, not on anything, not floating, just present. The child had dark eyes that seemed impossibly old and a slight smile that made me instantly uncomfortable. The child spoke, but not with words, more like thoughts appearing in my mind, fully formed. "Hello, Professor Ashford. We've been waiting for you." I tried to speak, to demand an explanation, to assert control over this obvious hallucination. But I had no body to speak with, no mouth, no lungs. I was somehow still me, still conscious, but untethered from physical form. Panic should have set in. As a materialist, this was impossible. But instead, I felt calm, unnaturally calm. This isn't real, I thought. Temporal lobe seizure, hypoxic hallucination, chemical cascade. The child laughed, not mockingly, but with genuine delight. "You're still trying to explain it away, even now." "That's what I always loved about you, Professor. Your consistency." "Who are you?" I managed to formulate the thought question. "I'm no one. I'm everyone. I'm the part of you that you spent 71 years denying existed." The child gestured, and suddenly we were elsewhere, in my childhood home in Manchester. I was 5 years old, sitting on my mother's lap while she read me Bible stories. I could feel her warmth, smell her lavender perfume, and I could feel something else, a presence I'd forgotten, a sense of wonder, of connection, of being held by something larger than myself. "You felt me then," the child said, "before you learned to rationalize, before you decided that what couldn't be measured couldn't be real." The scene shifted. I was 12 at my grandmother's funeral. I was crying, not just from grief, but from fear. Fear of the emptiness, fear of the void I was certain waited for us all. And in that moment, I'd felt something, a whisper of comfort, a sense that she wasn't gone, just changed. But I dismissed it, called it wishful thinking, the beginning of my armor. "You chose fear over faith," the child said. "Not religious faith, just faith that existence meant something, that consciousness was more than neurons firing." "I chose reason," I thought back, defensive even here. "Did you?" The child waved again, and I saw myself, but from outside. I watched my 23-year-old self, newly minted PhD, destroying a graduate student's thesis on consciousness studies. I watched her cry after I left. I watched her change her focus to something safer, something I wouldn't eviscerate. I felt her disappointment, her lost potential, the research she never pursued because I'd made her feel stupid for wondering. "You didn't choose reason," the child said softly. "You chose cruelty disguised as reason. You chose ego disguised as enlightenment." Scene after scene unfolded, not like watching a film. I was in them again, but with the horrifying addition of feeling what others felt. I relived the evening I mocked my wife for buying our daughter a book on angels. I felt my daughter's shame, the way she'd learned to hide her sense of wonder from me, the way she grew up believing that intelligence meant cynicism, that wisdom meant hardness. I watched myself debate a hospice chaplain on television, systematically dismantling her beliefs while she tried to explain the comfort faith brought dying patients. I felt her humiliation, but worse, I felt the impact on viewers. A woman whose mother was dying, who'd found comfort in the chaplain's words, now felt foolish. A man questioning whether to baptize his child, now certain that doing so would make him intellectually weak. I'd planted doubt, not the healthy kind, but the kind that isolates, that cuts people off from comfort and community and meaning. You were so certain, the child said, so absolutely convinced that consciousness ended with death. That love was just oxytocin. That meaning was just evolutionary programming. You turned uncertainty into a weapon. But there were other moments too, smaller ones. A student whose life I'd saved by encouraging them to seek help for depression. A lecture where I'd defended someone's right to question authority. A paper I'd written defending secular ethics that had actually helped people construct moral frameworks without religion. Not everything I'd done was destructive. No, the child agreed, not everything. But you spent so much energy being right that you forgot to be kind. You mistook intellectual victory for actual wisdom. Then the child showed me something that broke me completely. My study, my body on the floor, but also my children. 3 people I barely knew, now in their 40s, gathered around my hospital bed. My daughter was holding my hand, my cold, unresponsive hand, and crying. I wanted to know him, she was saying. I wanted him to know me, but he was always so certain about everything. There was no room for me. I felt her grief, her anger, her regret, and I realized I'd been so busy being right about death that I'd forgotten to live, to connect, to love. I'd sacrificed relationships on the altar of intellectual certainty. I'd chosen being correct over being human. What happens now? I asked the child. Am I dead? That's up to you, the child said. You can stay here, continue on, or you can go back. But if you go back, you have to actually live differently, not just say you will actually change, actually let people in, actually admit you don't know everything. I looked at my daughter's face, really looked at it. I'd missed so much. Her wedding, her children being born, thousands of small moments because I was too busy proving God didn't exist to notice the divinity in human connection, the sacred in the ordinary, the transcendent in the simple act of being present. I want to go back, I thought. Please, let me go back. The child smiled. That's the first time you've said please in decades, Professor. The return was violent, like being shoved through a doorway too small for my form. I crashed back into my body with such force that I gasped, my lungs expanding with a sound like tearing paper. Pain exploded everywhere. My chest felt crushed. My arms screamed. Tubes down my throat, wires everywhere, machines beeping, fluorescent lights burning my eyes. But my daughter's hand was still in mine, and when I squeezed it, weakly, barely, she looked at me, and something in my eyes must have been different because she started sobbing. Dad, can you hear me? I couldn't speak around the tube, but I squeezed again and again, trying to communicate everything I'd learned, everything I needed to say. Recovery was long, quadruple bypass, months of rehabilitation. But I was different. My colleagues noticed first. I started my first lecture back with an apology. I've spent 50 years teaching you to question everything, I said, but I forgot to teach you that some questions, the ones about meaning, about connection, about love, don't have empirical answers, and that's okay. That's not intellectual weakness. That's being human. I rewrote my final book, not as a takedown of near-death experiences, but as an honest examination of consciousness, mystery, and the limits of materialism. I called it What I Got Wrong, a Philosopher's Reckoning. My publisher hated it. My atheist colleagues felt betrayed. But letters started arriving from people who said it gave them permission to wonder, to question, to hold science and mystery together without choosing sides. I reached out to my children, really reached out. I apologized for being absent, for valuing being right over being present. We started slowly, monthly dinners, then weekly calls. My daughter introduced me to my grandchildren. I cried when I met them. I'd missed their entire childhoods being certain about things that didn't matter. I still don't know what happens after death, not with certainty. But I met something, or someone, or some aspect of consciousness that transcended my physical form. The child could have been a hallucination, could have been my subconscious, could have been something else. I don't know. And I've learned to be okay with not knowing. What I do know is this: I wasted 71 years being certain about death while forgetting to live. I turned intellectual rigor into emotional rigidity. I mistook having answers for having wisdom. And it took dying, or nearly dying, to teach me that the greatest truths can't be measured or proven or argued into existence. They can only be lived. Love is real. Connection is real. The profound mystery of consciousness, that's real too. Not because I can prove it in a laboratory, but because I've felt it. Because every moment of genuine human connection hints at something deeper. Something that transcends neurons and synapses and chemical reactions. I'm 73 now. 2 years past my death that wasn't quite death. I don't have much time left, probably, but I'm using it differently. I'm present with my grandchildren. I listen to my daughter. I've even started meditating, something I would have mocked mercilessly 5 years ago. Not because I've found religion, but because I've found humility. I've found the courage to not know everything. The child was right. I spent my life choosing fear over faith, certainty over wonder, being right over being kind. And in one afternoon, in the space between heartbeats, I learned that all my certainties were just armor. Protection against the terrifying, beautiful possibility that existence means something after all. I was wrong, not about everything, but about what matters. And I'm grateful I got the chance to be wrong while there was still time to live differently, to love better, to embrace mystery instead of destroying it. We're all going to face that transition eventually. The question isn't whether something waits on the other side. The question is whether we're living now in a way we'll be proud of when we review it all. Whether we're choosing connection over certainty, presence over proof, love over being right. That's what the child taught me. That's what changed everything. And if I could go back and tell my 23-year-old self anything, it would be this: your certainty will make you famous, but it will also make you lonely. And when you're 71, collapsed on your study floor, you'll realize that all the arguments you won were just noise. What matters is the moments you were present, the times you chose kindness over being correct, the people you let love you, and the people you learned to love back. I don't know if there's a God. I don't know if consciousness survives death. But I know I met something that knew everything I'd ever done and loved me anyway. Something that looked like a child but felt eternal. And that possibility, that mystery, is enough, more than enough. It's everything.